We do continue with the assessment around Namibia. Dr. Charles Sinkala, who's an international relations consultant, joins us to expand the conversation further. Dr. Sinkala, a very good evening to you. Thank you so much for your time. Namibians have been commended for undertaking a peaceful election, and outgoing President Nangola Mbumba has also promised that every single vote will be counted. Of course, that level of commitment brings under the spotlight the issue of integrity around these elections, right? Okay, we are still battling to get hold of Dr. Sinkala, but of course posing some of the questions. Oh, you're there. Absolutely, yes.
Indeed, this has been a concern, especially in the southern region, that we are now engulfed with protest, especially from the post-elections in Mozambique. And I think the Namibian government is trying by all means to make sure that the elections are free and fair.
We know that just over, as you and I speak, just listening to the report on the ground from the SABC's international news editor, that challenges have risen with this election, with voting stations not having sufficient material to ensure that voting does take place, and you know, the questions around the security and whether or not there will be some compromises as material is transported overnight beyond the 9 o'clock deadline. What are your thoughts around such challenges?
Those are not unusual challenges. I think for every elections, you know, you get those challenges in terms of logistics. Namibia is quite vast in terms of the landscape, and most of it being a desert becomes a challenge as most of the people live in remote areas. But I think if the Independent Electoral Commission can achieve at least above 80% in terms of conducting their logistics, things to have access for the voters to have their opportunity to vote, that can be considered at least, you know, to conform to the international regulations in terms of free and fair elections.
Just over 1 million people registered to vote in these elections, with 64% of those being those under the age of 42. We've just also gotten some feedback on the ground with a lot of happiness around the long queues that were seen in parts of Namibia. Of course, that interpreted as a sign that, you know, people went out and they were eager to vote. What factors do you think would have influenced such a significant or perhaps high turnout in these elections?
It is important to say that elections brings hope to the people, you know, and I think the challenges that they've had in the past, especially that SWAPO has been in power for more than 35 years. The young people who are the majority of the citizens of the country has been vying for opportunities, employment, and as well as the counter corruptions which has been engulfed in the SWAPO party itself, especially where most of the senior government officials were implicated, including the former president who died in February. The quest for more political parties to participate, you know, to dethrone the first, you know, party which formed government in 1990 has actually, you know, intensified. But the only challenge which is there, Namibia is not like many other nations, you know, their disorganization in terms of opposition political parties. Maybe it might give, you know, SWAPO again to come back into power, even though that in 2014, if you look at the statistics, SWAPO won with about 80% of the electoral vote, but again they dropped in 2019 to just about 55. So it is quite in the danger zone. But like I mentioned, the splitting of the votes by 21 candidates or 21 political parties with 15 presidential candidates, that might just maybe give SWAPO another chance. But the third majority might be a challenge in terms of achieving the outcome.
As you assess that, I mean, really just looking at what's happened in South Africa, the outcome of the May elections resulting in a shift of power with the formation of the Government of National Unity. As you talk about the dynamics at play and assess the strength of the opposition parties, making reference to the disorganization in comparison to the ruling Southwest Africa People's Organization, which is seeking to extend its stay in power, what do you think are some of the biggest loopholes as you expand on some of the challenges you mentioned?
I think the ruling party, if they go under 51%, they have to work with other opposition political parties. And South Africa, yes, has set up some standards in the southern part that not all is lost, in terms of the ruling party not achieving that goal. There's always a room for them to work together, in creating a government of national unity. But there's quite a number of challenges in terms of the conundrums, in terms of loopholes. Of parties working together because they've got different ideologies. They are former SWAPO members, like the one of the party candidates, who is a doctor and he was in the UK for more than 30 years, was suspended in 2020. So they've got quite a beef in terms of working with the ruling party. They'd rather work together themselves with probably other parties. But it is quite early now to see whether or not they will work together. But we anticipate that the ruling party will fall below the mark of 51%. But the constitution of Namibia gives the provision that should the ruling party not gain the majority of 51 plus, I think the two runners will be close to, achieving such, and they have to go for the rerun, that will give one, the majority. But even though they will lose the grip in terms of the parliamentary representation that will have in parliament, that also comes back to the government of national unity.
Yeah. We've seen countries like Mozambique having struggled to manage post-election unrest and, of course, a deadly insurgency. Do you foresee any challenges to political stability post-elections in Namibia? I ask that because so far we've heard of how peaceful matters are, but what are the probabilities should there be people who least expect the outcome?
These protests and, disobedience with government provisions and the statutory provisions in terms of the management of people, public disobedience has been overflowing to other nations. We saw how it has started in Lesotho, managed by South Africa. Now it went to Mozambique. And there could be a possibility that, the peoples of Namibia, they might not be happy with the outcomes. But of course, politics, they can go either way. We have seen how Botswana last elections has just changed the landscape, in terms of dethroning the political parties, which started the inception in terms of their democracy. We only hope that, the peoples of Namibia, shall look beyond their differences and tackle the issues that are affecting the country, such as unemployment, difficult in terms of economic activities, people living below $5.50, and migration problems, in terms of moving the country forward.
Very well. Thank you so much for speaking to us this evening. Dr. Charles Sinkala, International Relations Consultant, of course, expanding on some of the probabilities as he analyzes the Namibia elections.